Welcome to part 2 of the little-known drivers of Easter, a series of reflections for Lent. I'm John Bridges, the author of The Blood of Innocents. I'm a Christian minister and I've spent several years studying the history of the life and death of Jesus of Nazareth. When I started to understand what really happened during the first Easter, perhaps the scariest thing was realizing how easily we all could have made the same decisions as those who crucified Jesus. We can read about the events of Easter in the 4 canonical Gospels and in various other contemporary writings. In the weeks ahead, I'm going to broadcast a series of short pieces of historical fiction, drawn from the material that I discovered writing The Blood of Innocents. They are the sort of conversations and observations that were happening among the people who were in Jerusalem with Jesus, but who had no idea how the story would end. It will, I hope, help us rediscover why, with hindsight, 2,000 years later, we still do Easter. Last week, we glimpsed how ordinary Hebrews might have viewed Jesus, and this week we'll look at him through the eyes of Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, the man who was responsible to the Emperor Tiberius for keeping the peace in Judea and keeping the money flowing to Rome. So, part 2. There are 2 great things about being prefect of Judea, thought Pontius Pilate, as he lay on a couch on a balcony facing the sea, enjoying the warm evening sun, gentle breeze on his face, and savouring the fruity taste of some wine. The first was this magnificent palace, built by the last Judean king Herod, with its relaxing view of the Mediterranean and the harbour of Caesarea Maritima. The second, of course, was his accumulating wealth, growing through commissions and trades, licence fees from various businesses, and honoraria in return for patronage. Maintaining law and order allowed everyone to flourish, so, as the Roman governor, he was entitled to a share of the proceeds. After all, if things went wrong, he would be the one answering to the emperor. Pilate's mood suddenly darkened at the thought of Tiberius, and his stomach clenched at the thought of his impending departure for Jerusalem to oversee the policing of the Passover festival. The recent uprisings had increased the political temperature, and the gods, it seems, were keen to worry him still more. Just as his men had beaten one set of troublemakers, his spies reported that a dangerously popular rabbi from Galilee, Jesus bar Joseph, was expected in Jerusalem for the festival. If Jerusalem was politically like a dry forest in a drought, this Jesus had the potential to light fires. Pilate had about 4,000 troops at his disposal, and though his officers were Romans, his soldiers were auxiliaries drawn from local lands, which was both a blessing and a curse. Simple hatred motivated them, so any lack of soldiers was regained by vindictiveness. Unfortunately, the Judean fighters hated his troops equally ferociously, especially the Samaritans. A circle of increasing violence was always possible, and significant trouble would, at best, extend his time in Judea. The arsehole of the world, as one of his officers had called the place, referring to the unpleasantly sulphurous gases given off by Asphaltites, the Dead Sea, to the east. He took another mouthful of wine, reflecting grimly how quickly the gods could arrange one's rise and one's fall. At a swish of silk, he glanced over his shoulder as Claudia Procula, his wife, stepped onto the balcony. She sat on his lap and kissed him. Fresh from yet another bath, she smelled of a floral perfume. The silk of her dress caressed him, and Pilate took time to enjoy the different sensations. She could tell he was troubled, though. "Is it that bad?" she frowned. "I'm just coming to terms with a long journey to Jerusalem and a week smelling burned meat and sheep shit," replied Pilate grumpily. "And this year in particular, we don't need more trouble." "But you've crucified dozens of the zealots in the last few weeks," Claudia smiled. "And we've got plenty of troops to keep on top of any others." "If only it were just the zealots," said Pilate. "Just to make everything so much more unpredictable, your favourite holy man is coming to Jerusalem for Passover as well." "Who? Jesus of Nazareth?" Claudia brightened up at the news. "It's a distinct possibility, I'm told," Pilate replied flatly. "Why are you so excited? He's got all Galilee and Samaria arguing about him. The last thing I need right now is a trip to explain to the Emperor why Judea is suddenly engulfed in civil war." "Jesus isn't trying to start a war." Claudia held out one hand to take a cup of wine from her slave and then waved her away with the other. "He's strictly non-violent." "That's what's so engaging about him, actually," she said, sipping the wine. If he was going to protest about anything, it'd be a silent protest. Exactly, said Pilate. Fighters are no trouble to us because we've got plenty of muscle. Silent ones are the real troublemakers. Jesus might revel in a confrontation with Rome that ends up killing him. What was his saying that you told me about? Blessed are the meek? That's because Jesus knows that force is no use against the meek. Violence only works against scared people with something to lose. And he just doesn't seem that scared. The meek wreak havoc against force. They just smile. To Jesus, my resorting to violence against him would be my admission of defeat. I see what you mean, Claudia sipped her wine in thought. But I still don't think Jesus is out to cause trouble. He doesn't need to be, replied Pilate. His view of life just doesn't fit with the way this world works. Here's a, for instance, turning the other cheek. That's a calculated insult to the ruling class. It's a slave who then turns the other cheek, and he's telling you, to your face, that his authority to defy you is greater than your authority to beat him. Jesus sees it. If everyone started ignoring the master's right to, what's that other saying you told me about, lord it over others, well, the whole basis of punitive government would collapse. Jesus doesn't live in the same world as us. So it's not him causing trouble that worries you then, is it? It's other people fighting about what he says. Do you actually know that it's coming? No one is too sure, but the high priest seems worried. Why? Don't tell me you've got a soft spot for him. Don't be silly, Claudia laughed. You know I find him quite interesting. Perhaps because he does live in a different world. Quite a nice one too. He makes me think about life in a different way, that's all. How nice to be free to think about different worlds, sighed Pilate. My worry is whether he's dangerous. What can I do if the worst I can threaten him with, in his eyes, is success? Next week, in part 3, we'll start to look at how Jesus looked to others in Jerusalem. In the meantime, you can learn more from my book, The Blood of Innocence. You can order a copy of the book online, either in paper or on ebook, and read reviews of the work itself at www.bloodofInnocence.com. I hope you'll listen to next week's broadcast, which will be released on Sunday, March the 7th. Thank you for listening.